I think an example that most people can relate with is defensiveness. You know, that's a blind spot that most people have. And I remember, like I was saying, when I came across your work, the reason why it was very confronting seeing those uni students say certain things, and even in their body language, the sort of nuances of someone's defensiveness when you can sort of see it, that someone feels under threat. It felt very uncomfortable for me because at that point for 5 years, I had been a so-called expert in understanding self-sabotage, an expert in brave expression and courage. And in my mind, I value transparency and honesty, and I value discomfort, and I'm an open-minded person. So all of these things that I thought of myself, but in the nuances of the people that you were speaking to, I could see myself, and I was like, oh shit. I can see myself in that. Not in the extremes of like shouting or whatever, it wasn't that. It was in the subtleties. But there were so many people, and I won't name any names, who I really appreciated their voice at the time because they were inviting me to think about cancel culture in a different way. They were inviting me to think about the costs of self-censoring, of not allowing for divergent thought to be something that you entertain. There were people that really opened my mind. But years down the line, some of those same people have sort of become caricatures of themselves. They're flying the flag for the so-called anti-woke. And that's not something that I align with in any way, because it's just repeating the exact same thing. It's sort of the horseshoe theory, right? Where the so-called woke and anti-woke behave in exactly the same way. They will all fly the flag for cancel culture if it suits their own interests, you know? I think we are doing ourselves such a disservice when we are talking about people bridging the divide in some kind of way and inviting people to be more nuanced and people to think differently.
You right-winger.
But we're... Thank you.
I think that should give us courage, exposure to other people's perspectives.
It's moving us in a good direction.
I just had a lovely conversation with Africa Brooke. She's a London-based consultant, coach, strategist, international speaker, known for tackling issues like self-sabotage and self-censorship. I hope you enjoy the episode as much as I do. She's just a lovely human being. Okay, Africa Brooke, thanks for coming on Conversations with Peter Boghossian. What brings you to Lisbon?
What brings me to Lisbon? So I have been coming here quite consistently for the past 3.5 years while I was writing my book, The Third Perspective. I don't know, I just came for the first time on recommendation, and for someone that doesn't really like overstimulation and hectic cities, there's something about it that's so calming to me. Maybe it's the people, maybe it's just the kind of energy and vibrancy of the city.
We've had some crazy good meals here.
Rick, the food is so good.
Do you like to eat?
I do.
We've had some fish. I'll give you the list before we go.
The seafood is very,
incredible.
very good.
And the sardines prepared different ways. Fantastic.
How long have you been here?
It's been 2 weeks, Reed, something like that. We came early to get some footage.
Oh, nice.
It didn't work as well as we wanted it to, but that's okay.
Oh, really? Have you been speaking to people sort of around
speaking
Lisbon,
to people on the street, more or less, and then did some interviews and some networking.
Really?
But we're here for GenSpec, the conference. That's ultimately why we're here.
Okay. I'm curious, actually, you say the street interviews, and that's actually how I found you in 2020. When I was, and I'm sure we'll get into this as we're speaking, but when I was sort of going through my own unraveling and trying to extract myself from what I felt was kind of a mind capture of sorts in terms of social justice, which I know we'll get into. A friend of mine sent me your street interviews. What do you call them? There's a specific...
Spectrum Street Epistemology.
It's incredible.
Oh, thank you.
And I remember feeling so uncomfortable because it's exactly what I needed to see, but I was seeing myself in some of the people that you were speaking to. People that were just regurgitating and parroting and were sort of one question away from everything crumbling, you know? And I had never thought of myself as that, but I was sort of seeing it right there. And what I appreciated about your approach is that you were not being sort of antagonistic for the sake of it. You were just asking very simple questions. And that's the thing about sort of mind capture. You only have to just ask a simple question for someone to go into a sort of error 404, you know.
Yeah.
But that's how I came across you.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the universities teach people the opposite of answering those questions. They teach them to be offended or to kind of, I'm doing this because I have a bad shoulder, you know, to tense up or to not. But it's I don't know. It's been a long, strange journey. So you do a lot of work in self-sabotage.
I do.
See, that's fascinating. So could you help me figure out if I'm a self-sabotager?
I can.
Okay.
I can also give you kind of a little bit of context as to how I even landed into the work that I do and what it means, because it might be a term that a lot of people have no idea. I think we're familiar with the term sabotage, sort of intuitively, right? Something getting in the way or someone putting something in the way so you don't meet some kind of goal or whatever it might be. But actually, my work started in 2016. I was 24. And I was an addict for 10 years at that point, from 14 up until 24.
What were you addicted to?
Alcohol was specifically my vice. It came with other things, but that was sort of the main thing. And I live in the UK and have from a very young age. I'm Zimbabwean. Drinking is just very much a part of the culture. You know, it's embedded in the fabric of the country. So no one would really notice if you have a drinking problem because it's sort of masked in how people socialize. It's kind of like the social glue. And I think the younger that you are, the more that it's seen as sort of a phase. It's not seen as anything that's worrying. But for me, from the very first time that alcohol passed my lips, it gave me this sort of arousal of all senses, and I didn't have to think about my differences anymore. I didn't have to think about insecurities. I didn't.
What do you mean
have
your differences?
My difference, that's such a good question. In that I came to the UK at 9 years old, and the part of the UK where we lived was predominantly white. So suddenly I was aware that I'm black. Something I'd never had to think about being from Zimbabwe, where everyone looks the same as you. But suddenly I was hyper aware because it's not as if, you know, I was a black person amongst a lot of black people and then other white people. It was not, you know, like that at all, especially in the early 2000s. So there was an insecurity that started to sort of embed itself in relation to those differences. So in drinking, especially at a young age, I didn't have to think about it anymore. I was just like everyone else, you know. But also there was a sense of freedom that came with it. And for me, that's when my addiction started to form. And it was mainly binge drinking, which would then become blackout drinking because I blacked out pretty much every time that I drank. Every single time. Yeah.
For years?
For years, for about a decade.
Holy.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I thought it happened to everyone, you know. I thought that's just what happens. So between 19 and 24, I'm 32 now, I relapsed 7 times, very big relapses, because I started to notice that I have a huge problem with alcohol. I didn't drink when I was alone. It was very social, which is why it sort of continued for such a long time.
You didn't drink when you were alone?
No, never. Only with other people.
What did you drink? What was your alcohol choice?
I mean, it was anything. Anything and large amounts of anything. But it was hidden in the social aspect of it, you know. So I kind of, and this is all to do with self-sabotage because I curated my life in such a way where the addiction was so well hidden. And I think that's something that I always invite people to look at. Have you found yourself kind of curating your life rather so that you can hide some kind of addiction or some kind of vice or something that is actually working against you? So my social circle, I was surrounded by people that also loved drinking in the way that I did. So there was no one to say, Africa, okay, there's a bit of an issue. So anyway, I relapsed quite a lot of times. And something that I always think has been my saving grace is that I've always been a writer. I've always been a very curious person. So I started writing when I was 24 publicly. It was an anonymous journal to begin with. And my mission at the time, it was not to build a platform or anything like that. I just needed to get well.
You
I
quit
would write.
drinking? Is that
I just needed to quit. I'd relapsed so many times. I didn't know what else to try. I had tried.
So you knew you had a problem.
I knew.
And you just couldn't stop.
I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop. And the reason for relapsing for me was a very unique one, because it's not that I was physically addicted to alcohol. There was like a psychological addiction to it for me. And any time that I stayed sober for, let's say, 3 months or 4 months, I would feel so uncomfortable because I was much more used to the chaos. It's
The chaos of being drunk and
the chaos of just having a very chaotic existence. It's almost like I knew how to navigate that better than things actually just going well, which is where the term self-sabotage comes in. I think of it as sort of, when you're the one poking holes in your own ship, if you will. There's no one else doing it for you. You're the one doing it for whatever reason. So any time that I was close to getting well, I would just feel so uncomfortable. And then I would justify, okay, I've done enough time, let me just have one drink. Even though I know that it's never just one drink. It's going to be binging for 5 days or 6 days or whatever it is.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you couldn't have just one and stop?
No. But,
was it only alcohol? Did you do drugs?
It was drugs as well, more towards the end of it. Actually, no, I would say from about 19, it would be drugs. It would be cocaine sometimes. It could be MDMA, it could be ketamine, usually party drugs. I never got into anything harder, and I'm so thankful for that. But alcohol was always the sort of thing.
And you never smoked
that I was
cigarettes?
drawn to. Now and again, but I just didn't enjoy it. I just preferred.
That's good.
If I was drunk, I might, but it was never sort of the thing. Alcohol was the thing.
Alcohol was the thing.
So that experience is where I first kind of got to learn about the term of self-sabotage. And it became just an area of fascination for me, because I could move away from my addiction being some kind of moral failing into wanting to understand the science of self-sabotage. Why do we find ourselves in destructive patterns and keep on going back? And if I link it to the work that I do today, where I really want to understand collective sabotage, which we call cancel culture. But I find that the term collective sabotage is much more accurate, because we're saying we want progress, for example, but we're using extremely regressive methods to get there. And we can sort of see that it's not working, especially in the context of social justice.
So when you say like collective, you mean this is a way that the society sabotages itself?
Yes, and movements and groups, however you want to look at it. I think, which is why I resonate a lot with your work and the conversations you have with people, because I think the social justice aspect of it is where I see this the most.
So how would someone know if there's, like, how does Reed know if he's a self-sabotager? How would someone know if they're self-sabotaging?
I think...
Because I don't mean to interrupt you, but
please.
But the idea would be you'd probably try to convince yourself that's not true.
Absolutely.
I would think that would be embedded in the idea.
You justify. I think one of the easiest ways, and then you can tell me if you have experienced it at any point, maybe even now. To me, one of the best ways to see is when the results you have in your life are in contradiction with what you say you want. So for example, you say you want better health. Let me just use sort of everyday examples.
Yeah.
You say you want better health. You say you want to be fit. You have all of these goals and to-dos and all of these plans, but your actions are in direct opposition of what you say you want. And the results in your life will show you, whether it be through your weight, whether it be through your relationships, whether it be through the reality of your financial situation, that actually shows you whether you're in alignment with what you say, or are you sabotaging something? And there's a huge gap between what you say and what you do.
Yeah, it was, it was interesting. The other night, Reed and I went out and we ran into some people, and one of the people, we ran into some people at a bar, and a woman ran out and started vomiting. And my natural assumption was she just had too much to drink. But so I wanted to go out and check on her, but I didn't want to go out and check on her alone because I'm just, a guy. So another woman went out, and then I went out and checked on her. And it turned out she had breast cancer. And so she was recovering from that. So I thought, okay, so let's, I'll just put her in an Uber and put her in a hotel. And she said she wanted to walk back. So the three of us walked back to her hotel. And on the way back to her hotel, and I just could not believe, I just could not believe it. She bummed a cigarette from somebody.
Why couldn't you believe it? What did you think about?
I mean, it was really, well, it was, so many things were going on there for me. First of all, what the fuck?
Yeah.
You're literally vomiting from the treatment from breast cancer. You have cancer. You should be asking for a carrot or something. That was crazy. But then it really made me think about other things about the work I do. If you can't convince somebody, or if someone can't muster the will to not smoke when they have breast cancer, how can you convince someone that they ought to do things that are in their own self-interest? Right. And but it was just such an interesting moment. So we traveled around with another guy, Travis, who is just hyper disciplined. I'm very disciplined, but I'm not we were in Taiwan and we went out to this place. So I don't eat, raviolis or anything. So we went out to this place, and this guy, he took us to this famous place, and I had a small wonton because I don't eat the wheat. Travis didn't have any of it. But it works for him, it works great. But it just got me thinking when you're talking about self-discipline, doing what's in your own best interest, the relationship between, if there is such a thing as the will, do people have a will?
Right.
So these are just kind of, and then I was doing an inventory of things in myself, trying to think, oh, geez, do I self-sabotage?
Where are you in, I sometimes think, and again, I'm also curious just to know from your own experience or just whatever comes to mind, I think a big part of this is kind of coming to an acceptance that we are contradictory whether we like it or not. And I think that's part of why, now I'm tapping back into a more wider thing, but I think one of the biggest reasons amongst many why we have the level of sort of division and intolerance and polarization, etc., is because we refuse to accept that we are contradictory. So when we are confronted with other people's, especially people that are willing to own their contradictions, it's sort of it feels very confronting because we're not able to do that about ourselves. And I think self-sabotage is a similar thing where all you have to do is to just look at where are you in contradiction with what you say versus what you actually end up doing.
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm thinking out loud. So you need two things. One, you need a radical level of self-honesty to do that. And two, wouldn't the better way to do that to be ask someone who you know very well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But you would think, right, that we should be able to do both. You should be able to have that level of self-inquiry. Although I think self-inquiry, and I write about this actually, that it is a very unnatural thing to do because we're very external. We sort of look at what are other people doing wrong, where there's a level of self-inquiry that is just not, it is not the default. You kind of have to do something that goes against the grain of being a human being, right?
Yeah, I don't know if, I could totally be wrong about this, but I think that there are layers of being honest with yourself.
Yes.
And at people's deepest or at the ideological level, I just don't think people are honest with themselves.
I agree.
I mean, the level of, I don't know, maybe it's not, if she, the cigarette woman, if she said, you know what, I've got breast cancer, I enjoy smoking more than I do of dying of a ghastly disease, but you would think anybody would know, given that they're vomiting out, so that would be the kind of the gold standard or among which, and I saw my parents die from cancer too, so maybe that's coloring my perception, but if she had kind of approached that situation more honestly, or maybe she did, I don't know, I have no idea. I was just so shocked by it. I was legitimately shocked by it.
Yeah.
But I don't know about so you have to match what you say, what you do. I've always thought that was a kind of the measure of a man, if you will. Really? Or the measure of a person. Yeah, what you say versus what you do.
Do you find that you match most of the time? What you say and what you do?
You know, I'm trying to think. Again, I hadn't thought about these questions beforehand, so it's a very large inventory of things that I have to go through in my life. But you know, I think I do. I can think of a few exceptions. I think I do.
Yeah.
But I'm almost fearful of saying I do in case that's my brain trying to trick myself into thinking that I do.
Because we all have blind spots, you know, and the thing that you said about being courageous enough to ask the people around you, what am I like? How do you experience me?
Okay, so that's
Right?
key. That's vital because in order for them, so you would have to have a friendship of virtue.
Yes.
You'd have to have a virtual relationship in order for those people to say, yeah. Like they would have to be willing to risk the foundation of.
Absolutely.
So there'd have to be a deeper cement to the relationship.
Yeah.
So my guess is if you're the kind of person who has that relationship, then you've cultivated other virtues like having what you say match what you do.
I actually don't think most people have those relationships.
Very few.
Yeah.
Do you?
I'm really learning that I do. I think getting sober forced me to do that. And owning my addiction out loud, being honest about the ways that when I was in addiction, I was very unreliable. I manipulated, I cheated, I was egoic in a lot of ways. I just had to be honest about the shadowy, really fucked up, ugly things that I did without actually blaming the alcohol. It wasn't because of the alcohol, it was because of the things that were already within me that just, came out to play.
The alcohol brought those things out.
Absolutely. Because you know what, Peter, I remember getting sober for the final time.
Yeah.
And for a while thinking that sobriety was suddenly going to save me from all of these sort of ugly traits and characteristics. And then realizing that actually those things were still there. They were just quieter, they were still there. I had to take ownership of that too, you know. So I think I have very, very honest relationships because I was able to own my shit out loud. So people know that they can meet me there and I won't be, defensive. And even if I still am a little bit defensive, because I'm human, I'm able to kind of be like, okay, I'm here, I'll still listen, I'll still take it on board. If I do enough kind of self-inquiry and I'm like, that still doesn't feel like it's true, I'll still respect the fact that you're telling me something, But I think a lot of people feel very uncomfortable to tell someone how they really experience them, I think it's a big thing. I don't think it's an easy thing at all.
I guess I'm just struggling with I don't know if I'm not really deceiving myself. I mean, I don't you're talking and I'm thinking to myself, geez, I don't think I have any of those things. And I'm thinking really, do I? So then I started doing another inventory. Yeah, I'm just trying to fit, how would epistemologically, I'm trying to because I think I'm incredibly honest with myself.
Yeah.
I'm almost afraid to say this on camera because it's gonna make me sound like a douche, but I think I'm just a super nice guy. I really do. I don't do anything fucked up. I don't hurt people.
Here's the thing though. I think sometimes we think they can be big things, that you do something fucked up or that you hurt people, that you manipulate. I think those are sort of the bigger things. I think when you get curious about blind spots, it can be in very seemingly small things that are just a part of you. So you don't really see them. It's habitual, it's habitual thinking and habitual behavior. I think an example that most people can relate with is defensiveness. That's a blind spot that most people have. And I remember, I was saying, when I came across your work, the reason why it was very confronting seeing those uni students say certain things, and even in their body language, the sort of nuances of someone's defensiveness when you can sort of see it, that someone feels under threat. It felt very uncomfortable for me because at that point, for 5 years, I had been a so-called expert in understanding self-sabotage, an expert in brave expression and courage. And in my mind, I value transparency and honesty, and I value discomfort, and I'm an open-minded person. So all of these things that I thought of myself But in the nuances of the people that you were speaking to, I could see myself. And I was like, oh shit, I can see myself in that. Not in the extremes of like shouting or whatever. It wasn't that. It was in the subtleties. So I think it's actually about getting curious about the subtle ways in which the ways you wouldn't even realize. A lot of us are more defensive than we'd like to think, especially when we feel like we're being questioned or so maybe it's more things like that.
Yeah, so maybe, I'm thinking it's like a cultivation of an intellectual virtue, kind of a cultivation of a virtue set. I was thinking, maybe I have read this, maybe I have, I don't know where I got this idea, maybe it's mine, I don't know. But there was always something, I called it a reflexive problem, something in the problem that prevents the problem from being solved. So I was wondering if the idea
Say that again?
Yeah, something in the problem that prevents the problem from being solved.
Oh, that's good.
Reed, she likes it. She likes my idea, Reed. Yay!
That's really fucking good.
Yeah. So like defensiveness would be good, because if you say to someone, hey, you being defensive, they're already defensive, and so it prevents the problem from being solved.
Yes.
I came up with that, I'm sure it has a pedigree somewhere, but I came up with that. I was at this woman's house, it's a long story, but her mom worked in a diabetes clinic, and she was telling me that there's something within diabetics that make them crave sugar. And I was thinking, well, that causally, that couldn't be true. It'd be like, this was my thinking process, like they just crave sugar, or they eat a lot of sugar, and sugar is addictive. I didn't understand how toxic it was at the time, and that causes them to be addicts. But there could just be something in the nature of certain, physical phenomenon or intellectual dispositional phenomenon that prevent problems from being solved. But sabotage would have to be a kind of a mechanism that I'm always thinking of. A buddy of mine said to me years ago, I'm telling myself not to talk about jujitsu, but they call him the jujitsu Vulcan. And so he said there must be a unified field theory for like these different positions. And then I thought to myself, well, geez, if there's a unified field theory for that, maybe there's a unified field theory for reason and rationality. Like maybe you can just wed different disparate concepts together in one kind of overarching. But I think that self-sabotage would have a key role in most of the kind of virtue dispositions.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's good. And I think something that I also had to learn for myself, and I try to emphasize to people, is that the language of self-sabotage can make it seem as if you are doing something on purpose to yourself. You don't care about your health. So the woman having the cigarette, even though she has breast cancer, she hates herself. She doesn't give a shit. She doesn't. It's not that. It's self-protective in some way. You're protecting yourself, from something, from some perceived. Yeah, I think when I reframed it as like a protective measure, it makes sense for most people, but you're just doing it in a way that doesn't make sense for other people. By snorting a line of Coke or drinking something, I was protecting myself from the anxiety that was in my body. There was like a somatic discomfort, So by doing that, it made me feel better. It made me feel safe. It was in a way that was not actually useful, because now in sobriety, if I feel anxious or nervous, I know that I can turn to other things. I know that I can turn to breath work, or I know that I can remind myself that I'm actually fine, I'm safe, it's okay, that I can leave whenever I want to leave. So I think when you start to realize that you're not getting in your own way because you hate yourself, you're doing it because you're trying to protect yourself from something. And I think that can add a little bit more compassion to it,
I've just never had the impulse ever to like snort Coke. I've never had the impulse to just, I was actually told Reed a while ago, I'm really glad I'm not an alcoholic, because we go and we try different wines, we do different things, and we usually stop at 2, almost always. But I'm glad I'm just not an addict.
Yes.
I just got lucky that way. I'm just not, I don't know.
Do you think you've never had anything you needed to escape from?
Oh boy, I have to really think about that. In Portland State University, I had to escape from there.
Yes, you did. Let me add some specificity. In your mind, anything you needed to psychologically escape from, because I mean, I'm no expert in addiction. I only have my own life experience, and my father was an addict as well. But the home that I grew up in was one where there was emotional and physical abuse. I have two older sisters, one younger brother, and my mother. So there was something that we all needed to psychologically escape from. I was the only one that ended up being an addict. The rest of them don't actually drink or anything, actually. But I think maybe that is a key ingredient, you know, that it's people that want to escape from something, whether you're running away from or running into.
Escape from anything. I don't think I have anything to escape from. I mean, I have kind of vague things, like I didn't want to be in the U.S. during the election, but you know, I don't have any. I don't know. Maybe I'm just astonishingly boring. I just don't have any personal demons. I had a great childhood.
That's good.
You know.
Yeah.
And, I think I'm just an incredibly boring, normal person.
Maybe not boring, healthy. Maybe you just had a healthy upbringing and a healthy life where you were valued and made to feel that you actually matter and that who you are is entirely enough and you don't have to run away from it. And
yeah, and I mean normal across the board. I remember I was friends with very close friends with a woman who we were talking about the Bill Cosby thing, you know, when he would like drug women and then rape them. And then I said, like, why would he do, like, what would be he's the good-looking dude. He was incredibly wealthy, successful, he's a movie star. And she said, no, you don't get it. I said, well, tell me what I don't get. And she said, well, that's just his kink. Yeah. And so they want to do that with minor attracted persons now. And, you know, this whole, I don't even know if I think he's a singer, that's P. Diddy. I think that's, I don't even follow any of that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the other thing about, like, I think I'm just remarkably normal sexually.
Yeah.
Like, we have to edit that. We have to edit that part out.
What? No self-censoring.
I don't have any like. I don't have any like, you know, kid stuff. I don't have any like, you know, raping with, you know, drugging anybody sort of, and like murdering people. Like, I just, when you look in the literature on prisons, when I did my dissertation in the prisons. The recidivism rate of people who go back in for sexual crimes is extremely high. So there's not a lot of bang for the buck to work with those people. You want to work with the people who you can help somehow give them tools to prevent them from going back in and help them desist from crime. But yeah, no. So I mean, I'm just like I think 0 on the demon list.
That's good. Can I get that on a T-shirt?
0 on the demon.
That's.
I just made that up. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
No, I hear you. I think a lot of this, to me, is sort of what happens when we repress parts of ourselves. It's that idea of the shadow, right?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that whole Carl Jung's idea of the shadow? And how the things that we repress will eventually come out to play. So when I think of people like, whether it's Bill Cosby or even some people that I work with in the public eye who have an image, you know, an image where they are the man who is just kind and just normal and just, you know, has everything, and someone that is very likable. Children love him, women love him, men want to be him, whatever it is. People can be trapped in that sort of.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I'll take it. Okay.
The archetype, he represents this idea, or sort of the perfect person who is flawless, someone who is morally perfect, and so on. Yeah. But actually, these people then start to feel very trapped in that image of perfection because it's not actually representing who they truly are. So they have to repress all of these things about them that they don't want other people to discover. But those things have to come out to play eventually, and they always do. That's why you always hear of, you know, a celebrity or someone that does something that is so either fucked up or so seemingly out of character. And I think that language is important. Out of character is the character that we're used to, but it's not, you know, actually who they are. you know.
So that's the thing. I'm friends with a good buddy of mine who's an actor, and he was telling me, it's like weird people will come up to him and they think they know him from his characters, from his roles.
Yeah.
But I think in my sense, it's a little different because people actually do know who I am.
Yes.
Because I'm not pretending to be anybody else.
Yes.
But
yes.
I think, I think that must be odd. Okay, so you're writing, you're living in London, you're working on self-sabotage, you're working on cancel culture, you're also really upset about the ideological, I don't want to say capture, I was thinking like strangulation that's occurring.
And I would say the piece in all of that I'm especially curious about is the self-censorship piece, where we all feel, and when I say all, I know that I'm being, generalizing here, but I think most people will resonate, especially in the West, where there's this just sort of feeling of walking on eggshells in conversation, where people feel like they have to overly self-edit their speech and they're self-surveilling, and we all start to do it to each other, and policing of language, and just not being able to have normal conversation, without speaking as if we're Twitter threads or putting so many disclaimers and caveats over. That's the part that I'm especially interested in the rise of self-censorship, because I think it's a much bigger problem than we think. I think we used to believe that it was sort of isolated to the digital world, but it's not. It's not.
Do you self-censor yourself? Are there things you don't say?
No, not anymore. And I think there's a difference between self-censoring, which is when you're editing your speech because of fear. So it's sort of grounded in fear. You're afraid of something, exile, punishment, being publicly shamed, being virtually stoned, whatever it might be, there's a fear that grounds it. Whereas there's social filtering, which is the thinking skill that we all use in conversation. Is this the appropriate audience? Maybe I can say this joke with Peter, but I can't really say it with someone else. Where you take into account environment and audience and timing and all of these intricacies of conversation. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
Because I never want people to think that I'm sort of thinking that we should all just say whatever the fuck we want to say with no consequences at any time, anywhere, because that's so ineffective,
And authenticity isn't saying whatever's on your mind.
No, not at all. And I think there's people, I'll park the thought that was coming to mind and come back to it. But I think it's important to know the differences. Self-censorship is grounded in fear. You're afraid that something will happen if I speak my mind or say this thing, or if people know that I agree with this. Whereas social filtering is grounded in discernment, if you will, where you're like, actually, I believe this thing, but saying it online is not going to be useful because I'm throwing it into a void where there's no context, let me just tell it to someone in person and have an actual conversation. Maybe this thought that I have or opinion, if I place it here, I don't want this to be a hill that I die on, Maybe I can have it in a more intimate space or go into a closed forum I think it's just discernment. It's not about saying everything. And I think sometimes we believe that, and the way that I write it, I say saying everything and saying nothing are not the only options. And I think we have come to sort of think that you have to say everything in order to be courageous and authentic, or you say nothing at all. And I think there's a beautiful
There's a lack of nuance, and that is a discerning principle. So just piggybacking off of that, and then we'll get back to the parked thought. I like that.
Yes.
Well, give me the parked thought first.
So when I came across you, there were so many other people that my ex at the time, who I absolutely adore, because he opened my mind to so many people that I had discarded because I had been told as a left-leaning person, and I put that in quotes because I don't even really know what that means. It's nothing that I've ever really assigned myself to, but people suppose that because I'm Black, because I think in a certain way, I should just be left-leaning. And if you look at my values, you could say that I am, but I think it doesn't mean much. But at that time especially, there were people that I was told that as a left-leaning woman, I shouldn't align myself with, but in terms of listening, not even personal relationships. So it would have been people like you, people like Joe Rogan, Jordan Peterson. You were on that.
I'm a right-wing maniac. There we
You
go again.
were on the ban list. And my ex just sent me all of these people. He was like, Africa, I actually think if you listened, you would really like what these people have to say. So he sent me a lot of your stuff and other
I like him
people's.
already.
He's wonderful. He's a beautiful man. And it really did, again, I experienced the cognitive dissonance because I was suddenly aware that I had been in so many environments where nothing new ever entered, you know. It was people only agreeing with the same thing and blah, 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 asking very safe questions. And when someone asked a question that was kind of, you know, pointed out contradictions or agreed with the so-called other side, they would be quickly exiled from it. So nothing new ever entered in these echo chambers. But I had no idea. This is why it can be so humbling when your worldview is shattered and you're invited to rebuild it again, you know, because that's what I had to do. But the parked thought was that there were so many people, and I won't name any names, who I really appreciated their voice at the time because they were inviting me to think about cancel culture in a different way. They were inviting me to think about the costs of self-censoring, of not allowing for divergent thought to be something that you entertain. There were people that really opened my mind. But years down the line, some of those same people have sort of become caricatures of themselves. They have sort of become, they're flying the flag for the so-called anti-woke. And that's not something that I align with in any way because it's just repeating the exact same thing. It's sort of the horseshoe theory, right? Where the so-called woke and anti-woke behave in exactly the same way. They will all fly the flag for cancel culture if it suits their own interests, you know? So that's something that I think ties into what I was saying about people that believe that courage and brave expression and undoing self-censorship means saying everything with no regard of, with no self-reflection or saying, actually, I had it wrong and not leading with self-righteousness. I think there's sort of, in the anti-woke camp, there's extreme self-righteousness, even from people that were more nuanced a few years ago. But I think a lot of that...
I see that all the time.
Yeah, and I wonder if a lot of that, similar to anti-racist activists, there's financial interest there as well. So they've sort of frozen themselves in time to wherever they got more money or more of a reach or maybe even a deal, or now they're signed to... And they sort of become this...
I don't think that's what... I think that's what it is with the anti-racist folks, but with the anti-woke folks, I think it's become a kind of... Well, I think it's a kind of combination of Christian nationalism. A lot of those folks are hardcore Christian nationalists, and it's kind of like, it's not an ersatz virtue, but it's kind of a pompousness about their own virtue, in a sense.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm not going to name the name of the conference, but I was at I'll name the name of the conference. I was at ARC, and I was just so struck.
I was there.
Oh, were you there?
Last year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just so struck by so much of it. And just to be clear, I like the organizer a lot, and I like the people, but I was just so struck by all these people were kind of, not all, but there were a lot of people there who were just so proud of themselves. Well, where were you 5 years ago? Where were you? You're a little late to the party, and then you're so proud of yourself now that I mean, some of this stuff is just, it's just so stupid. It's just, that's why I couldn't really go to the GenSpec conference too much.
Right.
I mean, how many hours of listening to people talk about mutilating children do I really want to listen to? I'll take the answer to that question is 0. So I just, I don't want that in my consciousness. I was telling Reed, it has to have a detrimental psychological effect. You cannot do that hour after hour. I couldn't even do it for an hour. But anyway, okay, so there's that. So, but you were saying something about...
But I think, I'll just interrupt you for a second, because I think what you're saying is very important, and it feels so refreshing to hear, because I think we are doing ourselves such a disservice when we are talking about people bridging the divide in some kind of way and inviting people to be more nuanced and people to think differently
You right winger.
But we're thank you. But I agree with you in that whether it's the summit that we're speaking about that we both went to, there's so many things like that I just no longer go to anymore. Because I think if we go back to that contradiction that we were speaking about, to me, a lot of it can end up being a direct contradiction of what a lot of people in the room started this for, you know? And it can end up being that sort of self-righteous pat on the back and sort of, sometimes it almost becomes a status thing as well, which I don't really like.
So let's linger on that because I'm glad you said that. So I'm 58 and I was pretty active in the atheist movement.
Right.
And I'm going to do an event with Dawkins in November.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that, not to name drop, I mentioned that because it's very interesting when you used to go to these conferences, they replaced the old gods with the new gods and the gurus, and I see that a lot, you know, when you go to these other, that's why I really don't want to go to any of these things. I think it's not good when you kind of elevate the status of people.
Yes.
You know.
I agree.
And so I also have no desire to be in the cool kids club, but this idea that I think it's a human tendency and we need to be mindful of it and we need to be careful of it. And those who move in the public space, I think it's not a good thing to participate in those. And I'm not saying, you know, you shouldn't go to conferences or anything, but there is something that, you know, it's at the atheist conferences, you know, people come up and take their pictures. And like, I'm just a guy who doesn't think there's enough evidence for believing in God. It doesn't mean you should take my picture.
Yes.
It's kind of weird, you know, like, oh, he doesn't want children to be mutilated. Let's get a selfie with him. What a great guy.
Yes, you're so right. When the sort of mission or curiosity, if you will, ends up being tied to some kind of status. And it becomes a sort of, I think I've been like that from the beginning. So a big part of how I kind of entered the public sphere when it comes to this conversation was in 2021. I wrote an open letter called Why I'm Leaving the Cult of Wokeness.
I remember that.
I just wrote this thing because I had come to kind of like a crescendo of feeling like I'm holding in all of these things. There's so many expectations because I'm a Black woman, because I'm whatever. And funnily enough, because I also was growing my armpit hair at the time, which I love, people thought I was like a feminist, left-leaning woman, so I should think in a certain... There were just all of these things. Anyway, so I wrote that letter to kind of divorce myself from the cult of wokeness. And this thing just exploded. I think at this point in time, it's probably been read by about 70 or 80 million people. And it's 4,000 words long, it's not short.
Wow.
And I knew from quite early on, in connection with what we're talking about, I knew that people were going to try and make me this sort of princess of anti-wokeness, you know. I
remember that, I remember that.
I knew that people would want me to be the UK Candace Owens. I knew that immediately.
Oh my God, what a...
and that people tried to do that.
What a horror show. What a total horror show. The UK Candace Owens.
People wanted me to be the UK Candace Owens, and they thought that that was going to be, you know, that they can sort of use me as a, see, we have another Black woman talking about it. I kind of knew what was going to happen. And I really made sure that I stayed in integrity, that this wasn't going to become like a status thing. This wasn't going to be the thing that I'm harping on all the time. When I talk about the problems that I see, I don't even use the language of woke unless I'm using it specifically. I used it in the title because I knew that people would read it.
Right.
And I knew that people have a different relationship with the word woke, which I go into. But I don't use that sort of language because I don't think it doesn't reach the people that need to hear it. It will cause people to sort of shut down immediately or people to agree with me and I'm preaching to the choir. So I'm so thankful that I didn't allow myself to become a caricature of myself because I see that happen so easily. And it's, you know, you start to get championed for an idea and you start to just do the same thing, you know.
I'm completely with you. You said something that that's lingering in my head I want to ask you about. So,
Yeah.
you know, you said you don't self-censor.
No. Not when it comes to, this is an interesting one. Not when it comes to sort of public ideas, social conversation, or even work and in business, etc. But where I have to watch out for self-censorship is in my interpersonal relationships. So my romantic relationships is where I have more of a tendency to self-censor and sort of be like, oh, can I really say this or talk about this? But when it comes to wider
What would be the
conversation,
thing in your relationships you couldn't talk about?
see,
Or can you not talk
logically,
about
rationally, I can tell you nothing. I can talk about anything, but I think there's sort of like wounding sounds a little bit extreme, but I'll go with it anyway. I think there's wounding when it comes to romantic relationships, just because of my upbringing, where sometimes there can be a sense of, I'll get into trouble. If I say that, I'll get into trouble, even though I know it's not true.
Like, what would be an example of something? Is a specific domain of things?
So I'm someone that needs personal space in relationships, not in a sort of running away kind of way, but just personal space. I love being with my person, but I need to do my own thing.
Yeah.
I just kind of do my own thing, even if I'm working, etc. And I've found in relationships, sometimes even asking for that personal space can feel like that sort of thing of I'll get into trouble, or even just needs, mentioning my needs, to be like, this happened and it didn't feel quite good for me. Can we talk about it? Or it can just very simple, whatever simple relational things you can think of. It doesn't happen so much anymore, but it's the thing that I have to look out for, where there might be a bit of anxiety in having a conversation. If it feels like there might be some conflict during it, because conflict avoidance was sort of the thing that causes self-censorship, right? You're avoiding conflict in some way. So it doesn't happen in any other area apart from...
And you become anxious when you self-censor?
Yeah. Or just, I can feel it somatically before I even intellectualize it. Because I could just be having the conversation and you wouldn't be able to tell, but I can feel it in my body, like a discomfort, you know?
When you meet people, do you find you click with some people and you don't click with other people?
Ooh, generally?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are the people you click with, are those people the people with whom you're more likely to just kind of expose your true self and just not self-censor?
I think I will expose my true self anyway, but there's just different sort of levels to it, right?
Like the time
Maybe
index?
with you, I might feel, because for example, you and I met, and one of the first things you did was to laugh, you know, and I'm someone that laughs. And I'm someone that loves...
Okay.
I'm someone that loves to laugh, and I could sort of feel your warmth and your openness, so it creates some sort of safety. So immediately there's a bit of safety.
Right.
And even in maybe how you might make a comment or humor, it shows me where we can go, even if it's quite early on. So there's a different level of openness.
Right.
Whereas if I meet someone that's maybe a little bit more reserved and they stand back, they'll still get me, because I'm always me regardless. But it's just sort of just different.
It takes longer? Like the time index is longer, it's just a longer time horizon?
I think so. I think that's just behavioral flexibility, you know, being able to behave just in a different way according to whoever you're interacting with. But I don't self-censor. I'll use a social filter, which I spoke about, where I just discern what the situation is and what the relationship is. But I think self-censoring just caused me so much internal pain that I just refuse to do it. Even if I'm extremely uncomfortable, I will still say what I need to say. I will.
Even if there's a price?
Yes. I'll use discernment. I won't be reactive. I'll sort of assess the situation and I'll see what are the ways that I could have this conversation. So I'll kind of do the assessment, which I think is important, but I just won't repress anything anymore. I just won't do it.
Wow. Okay. So there's so many things that I want to ask you about. I want to ask you about the. I'm still thinking about the the alcoholism and thing. So why'd you break up with your ex? You said he's a lovely person.
Because in that specific relationship, we were just, for the long term, which I didn't want anyway. I didn't want anything long term, but we just fell in love. We were incompatible. I wasn't ready, and he wasn't ready in a lot of ways, but I wasn't ready to receive the love that he was ready to give at the time. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
I just didn't have the capacity to hold it at the time.
And how long had you been sober at that point?
We were together from 2018 up until 2021. So I'd been sober for a while.
Okay.
So he met me when I was sober.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that was when this whole madness was going on.
Yes.
And so that could have had something to do with it? As external pressure?
No.
No? Okay.
In what way? So I know that I'm answering the
Yeah,
right way.
well, I mean, often the circumstances of one's life, and if you're involved in kind of fighting a mass cultural delusion and everyone is upset at you and there's a lot of stuff going on for you and pressures given the age, maybe that bled its way into the relationship?
No.
Okay, well, that was good.
Yeah, that was very good.
Yeah.
He was, and again, he's still someone that I'm friends with today because we had a friendship to begin with. It just turned romantic and then saw that it was incompatible, separated for a while, and then sort of reclaimed our friendship. But he really was essential in that time, in me understanding that a big thing for me was this feeling that I'm betraying other people, other Black people specifically. I'm betraying Black people by saying that I don't agree with like most aspects of anti-racism, which is really fucking insane to say out loud. But this is just how it felt. None of this was rational. It was all just emotional, and it feeling, even when I was writing that open letter, it feeling like such a betrayal to say that as a Black person, I don't feel oppressed. And he was extremely he's white, by the way, Jewish. And he was extremely supportive throughout that entire time. And he was someone that I could make sense of a lot of things and conflicts that I was experiencing internally. And he would send me so many things that I could listen to and read, and we would just talk. And, you know, he's my intellectual equal in so many ways. So I never felt that anything that was happening internally was too abstract. It was just like so what was happening in the world at the time didn't contribute to the ending. It actually contributed to us having a friendship, you know.
So you weren't ready, are you ready now? What if he came back?
I'm in a relationship now.
Oh, so the answer is no, you're not interested
I'm not ready for
in him anymore.
No.
Yeah, because I've often found at certain times in my life, I'm more receptive and open to certain things, and other times I'm less. It just depends on what's going on in my life, too.
This brings a question to me.
Yeah, anything.
In terms of the work that you do and just your mind and your worldview.
Mind read.
Your worldview.
Yeah.
Does that impact positively or negatively romantic relationships for you? And are you in one right now?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So, so say it in terms of what?
Let me start with, are you in a romantic relationship at this moment in time?
No.
And is your romantic life impacted by your worldview and the way you, and the work that you do and the kind of things that interest you or anything like that?
No, I don't ever think about what I do. I both think about what I do from the instant I wake up to the instant I go to bed. So I'm constantly working and literally just nonstop. But then again, I don't really think about it at all in another sense.
It's a part of you.
Well, I have a kind of compartmentalization of it, and I don't think it bleeds through.
Yeah.
I don't think it does.
But you said you work all the time. Is there room for someone else to be in your life romantically?
Beside Reed? Well, I mean, I travel. So that's the problem. Like, okay, so let me say this way. I could not have a serious committed relationship to somebody because I travel like 11 months a year.
Yeah.
So I could have a relationship, you know, I can be with someone, but you're just traveling that much. I mean, you're away from home. I mean, we're away from home for 6 months. So any relationship you would have an expiration date on it.
Or you would need to be with someone, because I would argue that what you're saying I can completely understand, but it's also it's a very binary sort of answer in many ways, because you could find someone who is open to that sort of lifestyle.
Well, Travis has. Travis,
Really?
we met. I think you saw her on the way out. Travis met her in Taiwan, and she travels around with us, and they're in love, and you know. So I suppose, you know, that's probably an option, but no, I don't think that those things. I don't know. I guess it depends. I mean, are you your work? I guess that's the question. Are you your work?
Am I?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I don't think I am
let
either.
me think about it. I answered way too quickly.
Oh, did you?
Let me
I don't think I'm my work, but are you your work?
Am I my work? See, my work and what I do now is so intrinsically a part of who I am that I don't see it as work. And it's also accidental. I didn't think one day, oh, I want to spend a good part of my life researching and understanding self-sabotage, and then I want to help other people navigate their own self-sabotage. It's all happened just because I needed to get well. If I'm to look at it in a very simple, I just needed to get well, got trained in several things so I could move from my subjective experience into really understanding the world around me. And now it's a part of what I do. But am I my work? I mean, yes and no.
Okay,
but I'm not consumed by my work. So I don't wake up every morning thinking, okay, I need to do this. I need to do.
See, I do.
I don't. It's so just like, no.
I mean, I guess the way to think about it, a litmus test would be, like, think of 3 people you're friends with. Do you talk about your work with them?
No.
Yeah, I don't either.
That's good. Do you think it's a good thing?
I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
I think it's a really good thing.
Even though your work might be a big part of your life, you're not so consumed by it that even your relationships are tied to the work.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm consumed by it, but I'm not consumed. Again, I think that maybe the compartmentalization is the way to think about it. But,
yes.
But you know, I'm just thinking about who my friends are outside of, you know, Travis and Reed. So like Matt Thornton's a very good friend of mine, and he's also my jiu-jitsu coach, and I almost never talk about any of this stuff with him.
Yeah.
Once in a blue moon. I almost never talk about jiu-jitsu with him either. We talk about Dungeons and Dragons, or we talk about
Oh, I love that.
other things, relationships, just ideas, or I'll run an idea by him because I respect his opinion, but we almost never talk about stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I've got a random question.
Anything you want.
Are you an artist?
No. For a moment, I thought you said, "Are you an autist?" No, I don't think so. No, I don't. I'm not an artist.
Artist.
No. It's the island accent. No, I'm not. Why are you an artist?
No, I asked. Or do you do anything creative? Anything in the arts? Maybe it's
I do.
a better question.
I do. I do.
What do you do?
I've never said this before, but I actually write poetry.
Really?
Yeah. I find it very very relaxing.
I can feel it.
I'm not very good. I'm a terrible poet, but I
asked that because so many people I know, including myself in the intellectual space, are people that are also artists. Maybe they wouldn't even call themselves that, but it's people that play music or write poetry or sing or, you know, play instruments or whatever. And I just find that very interesting, that so many people that are now objectively doing serious sort of work also have this sort of ways in which they express themselves.
You think it's like a balance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any sort of special thought or conclusion, but it's something that just came up as you were speaking. I was like, I get the feeling that you might do something.
Yeah, and I always think maybe I should I wrote a young teen book. It's like a fictional book of fiction.
Really?
Yeah, I have to rewrite it though. My publisher rejected it. My publisher, my agent has rejected two of my two last manuscripts.
Really?
She said the last one was too academic. So I've been busy. I haven't had a chance. But that was a really good kind of discharging of that creative impulse. I like that. That was fun. It was fun to me. It was more work than I thought it would be, and it didn't come out. I just have to. I have to fix it. But yeah, no, I do think that the balances. So that's kind of like the unified field theory thing again. So it's like I think to be a complete person, there has to be a component of physicality there.
Yes.
Like I value people who, okay, maybe they can't tell you who the vice president is, but they have some physical excellence. Absolutely. You know, maybe they're just like incredibly good at, you know, I don't know, flamenco dancing or something. But I respect people who cultivate a physical excellence.
I agree.
And I think that so that there's a physical thing, there's a mental thing, and even that you could break that down, you know, like different elements of physicality, different elements of, you know, because I think we just terribly overvalue academic and scholastic. It's terrible. Especially nowadays. I mean, now it's almost like opposite land. You know, someone was telling me last night they enjoy speaking about these subjects, but sometimes they feel like an imposter because they don't have a degree. And my response is like, some people who have a degree, it's like they've credentialed themselves as an ignoramus, right? I mean, they've gone through a type of credentialing that leads them away from reality. So why would you, you know, but we're still stuck in these kind of legacy models.
We are.
Of reality.
I think it's a very sort of Western thing, I find.
So your books, tell us, you got The Third Perspective, and tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, if anyone listening to this has resonated with a lot of the things that I've spoken about, that's pretty much what I explore in The Third Perspective. So the subtitle is Brave Expression in the Age of Intolerance. I sort of came to a point of, I wrote the open letter, and immediately I knew that publishers, editors, agents would want me to expand on the open letter and make that into a book, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that because I think having a beautifully crafted rant is good, but I don't know that we need more of that. I don't know that we need more of the sort of
I think that's
why.
Right.
I don't know that what I'm here to do is to just throw something into the void of the culture war and hope something sticks or someone dives in and takes something useful. I actually wanted to use my intellectual property as a researcher, as a consultant, as a developmental coach, as a strategist, as a Jungian analyst to tell people the ways, to kind of give people the how. How do we actually push back on this culture of fear? How do we push back on this culture of self-surveillance and surveilling others? How do we start to understand the intricacies of cancel culture, which I call collective sabotage? Kind of give people the how. That's what I wanted to do in this book. And I do weave in more of my story around what actually happened in the summer of 2020 for me, because the George Floyd riots and everything that came after it was sort of the moment that I started to experience that crescendo that I was talking about. And yeah, that's when my unfurling happened. So this book is giving people the how, because I think we have enough of the why. I do.